All right, let's try this now. Okay. Test. All right, now can you hear me? Can you hear me now? No video. My homeboy's up in the chat. Jeff, ADH. Okay, good. You can hear me. Nice. All right, and camera doesn't work. Camera on this is broken. All right, let's get to it. We got 20 minutes till Kotel. So I'm going to dive right in. I'm talking about Macbeth. I'm going to give a sort of an occult analysis or an analysis of the occult elements in Macbeth and some of the symbolism. I'm going to talk about the Polanski version. And I'm just going to start from the beginning here. I'm not, this isn't, everybody here is a grown ass person. So I'm not, this isn't teaching. This isn't didactic. We're just going to discuss it. So give me a thumbs up in chat if you can hear me. I'm going to dive right in. All right. So, Shakespeare, April 23rd, 1564 to April 23rd, 1616. He died on his birthday. He wrote 37 plays. He's the greatest writer in the English language. But specifically, I'm not going to give you a history of Shakespeare, aside from the fact that Macbeth is an interesting play because it's one of Shakespeare's four tragedies: Othello, Hamlet, King Lear, and Macbeth. And this one is interesting. It stands out. When you talk about the Aristotelian elements or qualifiers for what constitutes a tragedy, this one doesn't quite fit in. Some of those elements include the fact that a tragedy has to have a character fall from a high place to a low place, death or exile. It does fit in that sense, but they also have to have a tragic flaw, and it's difficult to assess what Macbeth's tragic flaw is, aside from a general sense of megalomania. At the beginning of the play, he begins as he's a war hero. The play begins in media res. It starts off right after a battle, a sort of a civil war, but with a foreign element, which is that Sweno, the king of Sweden, has joined with this guy Cawdor to fight against Duncan, who's the king of Scotland. This is all based, and this has actually happened. It's based in history, except for the fact that Shakespeare takes liberties with the action, obviously. And what happens at the beginning of the play is this play is interesting because he wrote it not commissioned for James, but he wrote it for King James. King James was the new king of England. And he became that because he was the closest thing that they could get after Queen Elizabeth died. She obviously had no heirs. So they got King James VI of Scotland, who became King James I. And James is interesting because he was into the occult. And he actually wrote a book called Demonology. And as we know, there are a bunch of, this was rife during the Elizabethan period. John Dee, who we know about, even Francis Walsingham, is, I don't know if he's rumored to have any connection with this, but it certainly ties into the interesting intrigues that were going on in the court. And the play begins with three witches that we all know. We've all heard of because we've all heard double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn, and cauldron bubble. which has become sort of a, it's like a nursery rhyme. But the weird thing is in this play that um, Shakespeare always writes in iambic pentameter, which is, I'm not going to go into that because it's too boring in general for just a stream. But it's what it essentially is saying is that Shakespeare always writes in a specific rhythm, and it's an unstressed rhythm. So it's like, to him who in the love of nature holds. It's always da 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 da, and every line is 10 syllables. Pentameter. There are 5 poetic feet in each line. But the play begins with an inversion of that, because the witches always speak in the opposite. They speak in something called trochaic rhythm, which is they take the natural order of things and they invert it. And the play begins with them sort of casting this shadow over the rest of the play. The question becomes in the play whether the witches are this is like fate, and Macbeth is fated to do all of the things, whether Shakespeare is saying that he's fated to do all of the things that he does in the play, or whether it's an impetus for him, or whether he takes part in an actual witches' sabbath and an occult ritual later on in the play. And as soon as the witches speak after the first scene, they say at the end of the first scene, they say, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. And this is where we get the idea of witches riding through the air. Like we think of, the witch on the broomstick, but the interpretation, we can interpret this a number of different ways, but basically that the witches are hovering through the air, and that when they say fair is foul and foul is fair, this is the actual inversion principle within the play. Because later on, when Macbeth meets up with he's with his best friend Banquo, and he says, so his first lines in the play are, so foul and fair a day I have not seen, which means essentially that everything that's good is bad and everything that's bad is good. Let's see if I can get the Streamlabs link in here. It might be too complicated because I'm total boomer tech, y'all. All right, I'm gonna roll through this, and then we'll pick up the rest later, because I've got 15 minutes till it cuts out. All right, so let's go with what happens in the second scene, and this is the fact that Duncan the king comes around, and he basically asks what's just happened in the battle. And one of his captains says that basically it was sort of tenuous who was going to win, but Macbeth shows up, and it says that he, let me quote his line here. It says, for brave Macbeth, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like valor's minion, carved out his passage, till he faced the slave, which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him, till he unseened him from the nave to the chops, and fixed his head upon the battlements. So what that means is that Macbeth sliced his way through a crowd of people till he came up to this dude, stuck his sword into his navel, and sliced him in half. The chops are the jaw, and that he cut off his head and put it on the battlements. The battlements, which everything in Shakespeare is, the reason this is interesting is because everything in Shakespeare sort of connects with everything else within the play. There's not a word misplaced. There's not an idea misplaced. When he says he fixed his head upon the battlements, later we're going to see Lady Macbeth mentioning the battlements specifically, where she says Duncan's fatal entrance under my battlements. Then it says, let's see, Duncan says great happiness. He basically hears about what has happened. And then we get to, and let me tie this in with the Polanski version of the film a little bit. If you haven't seen the Polanski version of this film, it's really good. It's really interesting because we all know of Polanski because of Rosemary's Baby and all of this stuff. But this play is interesting because Macbeth for actors is referred to as the Scottish play. They call it that. We all have kind of probably heard that before, but they call it that because it's bad luck to say the name of the play, especially within the theater. And this is because the play has a history of horrible things happening during production. And this movie version has got to be the absolute worst in terms of that, because this is the first movie that Polanski made immediately after the death of Sharon Tate and the whole Chaz Manson business. So what happens is in 1970, the first movie to show bloodshed like this on screen was Bonnie and Clyde, which was like immediately preceding this film. And this movie is pretty disturbing and disconcerting because um, Polanski they had just gone through this thing where his wife and a whole bunch of people were slaughtered, and the play includes elements that really closely reflect what happened in the actual crime. So there's a lot of bloodshed. There's a scene where Macduff's entire family is slaughtered. We have elements of a BABY, which occurs in the movie twice, and it plays a huge part in the play because when we get to Lady Macbeth, we'll see that she gives this incredible monologue. Let me find it here real quick. I'm kind of skipping around, so forgive me. But she says in, let's see, Act 1, Scene 5. Okay, so Act 1, Scene 5, what happens is, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Macbeth has been rewarded by Duncan, the king, and he's gotten promoted to a lord, and then after this is I'm gonna go back to this in a second, but after he has talked to the witches who told him that he shall be king hereafter, he writes a letter to his wife and says basically, I could be king, and she immediately goes into prototypical Lady Macbeth mode, and she says, Duncan is going to come to their castle. That's part of this feudal system. It's like the king says, he's going to go to your castle. He can go and he can party there for a month, and you have to put up with it. You have to pay for him. So he says, Lady Macbeth says, the raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. She says, come, this is total esoteric, occult, demonology. She says, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect in it. Come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. So what she's doing there is clearly an invocation. She's saying, and this is interesting because we meet these three witches, and it's you could say I wonder in this play, is Shakespeare saying that she's in this coven, that Lady Macbeth is part of this coven? Because what she's saying here is that she's invoking these spirits to fill her up, to come into her soul. And when she says, take my milk for gall, you murdering minister, she's saying basically, like, imagine, this is mother's milk, sustenance. And she's saying, take it for, like gallbladder, like acid, right? It's totally inverted. She wants everything good to be bad, and everything that's bad for her is good. She's also saying here that my keen knife see not the wound it makes. She's clearly already intent on killing Duncan. Um, she meets up with Macbeth. He comes in, and they're an amazing couple because they're totally in tune with one another. And the weird thing in this play is that everybody in this play has children. Um, borderline Papa Ewok. These are people. When you see John Kerry and his tomb mate, these are people. These are people that have some of the most ancient Egyptian rituals. So he says, let's see. She says to Macbeth, her advice to him is, "Oh, never shall sun that morrow see." She's talking about the king when he comes to their house. "Your face," she says, "your face, my Thane, is a book where men may read strange matters to beguile the time. Look like the time. Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. He that's coming must be provided for, and you shall put this night's great business into my dispatch, which shall to all our nights and days to come give solely sovereign sway and masterdom." Notice the alliterative S sounds there, right? Because it's sinister. And the serpent, you can't miss this. She says, her advice to him, and this reappears throughout the play. She says, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." This totally wicked. She's saying that when Duncan gets there, put on a nice face, put on a brave face, be a sweet host, and let me do all the work. But remember that you are the serpent under the flower. And this idea of appearances versus true motives and reality appears throughout the play. I'm going to go back a little bit because we skipped over when Macbeth and Banquo meet up with the witches, which is incredible. This scene, we're still in Act 1. Every Shakespearean play has 5 acts, and that's not because of Shakespeare. Scholars went back and divided every play into 5 acts. Every act can have an infinite number of scenes, but they always have 5 acts. And Shakespeare is brilliant because when you read a play, like when you're in school and you read a play and you're reading like some horrible American play like Arthur Miller, and he's got 5 pages of stage directions, or Eugene O'Neill, before the actual dialogue begins, or before the play really begins. Shakespeare, 500 years before that, eliminates that by putting all of his stage directions within the words. So everything that matters is in the text. He's also great because we don't really know that much about Shakespeare and his personal life. And the point is that we don't have to. Everything in Shakespeare is within the text. We don't need to know anything about his personal life. We don't need to know where he went to school. It's all in the words. And so let me get to, so Macbeth and Banquo, who are BFFs, they're riding right after this battle. These are just dudes being dudes. They've just had this battle. They just killed a bunch of people. They're hanging out on their horses on the heath, the wild, windswept places of Scotland. And all of a sudden, and again, Macbeth's first lines, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen," which indicates like, okay, it was foul because there was a bloody battle, and fair because now it's over. But also, is there another meaning? Does it mean that he delights in the violence and the darkness of the day? So here comes Banquo is chilling with him. And then all of a sudden he says, these witches appear. And he said, and Banquo addresses them first. And he says, "What are these? So withered and so wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on't. Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me by each at once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so." So Shakespeare tells us in the words that these witches, their choppy fingers, they've got these gnarled old fingers, and that they have beards. These are bearded ladies, right? And Banquo mentions it. So then Macbeth commands them to speak if you can. What are you? And this is like what we've heard a million times about, demonic rituals, about calling in demons, or addressing them by name, or welcoming them, right? Or like Dracula welcoming, he can't come in the house unless you invite him in. So that's what Macbeth does. He talks to them, and they say to him, "Oh, can you guys hear me? My audio chopping up. Oh, let's see my signal. I got a good sig, so it shouldn't be. If it keeps chopping up, just tell me. I'm on data, no Wi-Fi. So they say to him, they greet him. There's three witches, and they greet him in three different ways. All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. That's what he is now. All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. That's what he will be. And then all hail Macbeth that shalt be king hereafter. That immediately piques his interest, obviously. And then Banquo says to him, "Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair? In the name of truth, are ye fantastical, or that indeed which outwardly you show?" He says, "My noble partner you greet with present grace and great prediction of noble having and of royal hope, that he seems rapt withal." And Shakespeare's spelling of that is R-A-P-T, right? Blood moons of Israel. So this is a reference to the rapture. He's rapt. In other words, he's completely taken away body and soul with what they've just said. He's transfixed. He can't even speak. And Banquo sort of speaks for him because Banquo is down to earth. And he says, "To me you speak not. If you can, look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not." This reminds me of like the parable of the mustard seed, or the inversion, right? Which would be this medieval idea. Yeah, this medieval idea of casting stones, right? Looking into the seeds of time, opening up animals, right? What do they call it? What is it? Divinology. He says, "Speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate." So, in other words, Banquo is saying, look, you said all this stuff to my buddy, bearded ladies, but what do you say to me, right? Because I don't really care what you say. It means nothing to me, and I'm certainly not afraid of you. And then all three of them greet him, and they say, "Lesser than Macbeth and great." See, this is the riddle: lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy yet much happier. Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. So they're clearly speaking in a riddle, um, and the symmetry at the end, right, with what they say. What they're saying here is, you're lesser than Macbeth because you won't be king, but you're greater than Macbeth because you will beget kings, right? His son Flance, in the play. Flance reminds me of like Fleece. Like the fleece was white as snow, right? He's like he's the innocent lamb in the play, and he actually survives. That Macbeth tries to have him killed, and he survives. He gets away, and the tie-in with reality here is that um, he. I can't link the Streamlabs because I'm just doing the straight to YouTube stream, so I'm I can't link it because it's screwing up because Boomer Tech. So when I come back to this, 5:30. When I come back to this, I'll have video and the links, you guys. And I appreciate all my homies here. Hold on, let me see if I can make Natesky moderator, ADH moderator, my homeboys, and my home queen. I love you guys. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Okay, so I'm just gonna wrap this one up. real quick. This has been fun. So I'm gonna wrap up the first part of this. We're still in Act One, and basically what happens is they greet Bank. Oh, I forgot the tie-in. The tie-in is that Banquo's uh, Banquo's son Flance will go on to have a line of kings that will stretch out to the crack of doom, as Macbeth says later. And James himself is a direct descendant in real life of Banquo. So later on, when Macbeth starts, after he kills Duncan, his next thing is going to be to kill his best friend Banquo and his son, so that he can secure his power. And Flance, as I said, gets away. One more thing here before I go, and that's that Banquo says something really wise here. That this is interesting and sort of ties into the world we've been talking about. He says, after the witches disappear, he says, let me get back to this scene. He says, I can't find it in the text. I'll just quote it by heart. He says to Macbeth, his advice is, oftentimes the instruments of darkness win us with honest trifles only to betray us in deepest consequence. And what he's saying here is that you've got to be careful, Macbeth, because they're telling you that you can achieve, like, you can have all this stuff. This is like Satan trying to tempt Christ in the wilderness, right? Um, Everything you see, you can have, right? You can have all of this wealth, but know that, and Christ says, get behind me, Satan, right? Macbeth, on the other hand, is totally transfixed, and we see this in every like scary stories to tell in the dark, in every fairy tale, and basically it's he wins him. We see this with Midas, right? Remember when Midas wishes that everything he touches would turn to gold, and the betrayal is that now he can't live because everything he touches turns to gold. His food turns to gold. He can't eat. He can't drink. And with Macbeth, it's that he's going to get everything he wants, but in the moment where he needs help the most, he's going to be betrayed. He'll be betrayed by evil, right? And this ends up happening. So the play is incredibly relevant to today for all of the obvious reasons. And the interesting thing is that Macbeth sort of he changes. He and Lady Macbeth switch roles in the play. Like he begins by doubting himself and he doesn't want to go through with killing Duncan. And Lady Macbeth is like, just do it. And then after I'll get to this in later on in the next one, when they actually go through with killing Duncan, and Macbeth is freaking out because of the blood on his hands, she says, basically, think of it like a picture, right? It's not real. It's just a movie. None of this is real. And then later on, that's going to haunt her because she gets the bloodstains on her hand and she starts sleepwalking and revealing that, out damn spot. She can't wash the blood clean from her hands. And Macbeth actually says something interesting when he comes down and she goes back up to plant the murder weapons. He says, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hands? No, it will the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. And Shakespeare, in that scene, invents a word. He creates a neologism, the word incarnadine, because there's no word to redden. So what he's saying here is that Macbeth's got blood on his hands, and it will take the entire ocean to wash the blood from his hands, but he can't, because the blood will make the ocean red. There's so much blood on his hands. And later on, he revisits this and he says, blood will have blood. So that's it for today. Thanks, homies, for being here. Yep. So I'm going to get off and I'm going to try to figure out how all this works. Thank y'all. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming. And I love you. And I will see you in Cotail. All right, y'all. Peace.